Hello everybody, my name is Voxel Obsession and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be starting a new series where I will be scoring every single weapon in Team Fortress 2. Starting off with my personal main, the Medic. Up first, we're going to be reviewing the Medic's stock weapons, the first of which being the Syringe Gun. Now, the Syringe Gun isn't exactly anything special, and the stats I've given it definitely reflect that. As you can see, I have split my ratings into 3 different categories, or 5, depending on how you want to look at it. The slot being quite an obvious one, utility being a measure of how often the weapon or the weapon's stats come into play to affect the weapon or the playstyle in a positive way. Accessibility being how easy it is to use the weapon, especially for a new player, and just the fun, which is a great way for me to sneak a little bit of personal bias into it. Then we have the role with offense being solely damage, defense being benefiting yourself in some way, and support being benefiting anyone on your team in some way. Now, the Syringe Gun is obviously a medic primary, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 for utility because, well, as a medic, you shouldn't really be using your primary weapon half as much as you should be using your Medigun. However, it does come in handy in certain situations where your meat shield has sadly died and you need to quickly run away and deal a little bit of damage as you do. Now for accessibility, the Syringe Gun is incredibly easy to use. With its super high firing speed and the arcing projectiles, you're not going to struggle at all to hit your target. Now for fun, the Syringe Gun is quite bland when compared to other weapons, but it's definitely not boring by any means. Next up is the Medigun, and by God is it an amazing weapon. I am not biased at all when I say the stock Medigun is amazing. Being Medic's stock secondary weapon, it is incredibly useful. It has full overheal, full healing rate, and its Ubercharge grants invulnerability. There is no situation where any of those things are not needed. For accessibility, this weapon is also incredibly easy to use. Any new player can click on someone with low health and they will be healed. The only reason I knocked it down to 4 is because it has the slowest Ubercharge rate out of all of Medic's secondary weapons, which requires you to stay alive for a prolonged amount of time. And now for fun, there is nothing more fun than Ubering someone and watching them clear out everyone. And this Medigun is the most liked, I think, from most players, so you will be thanked for your Uber. It is also incredibly satisfying to heal your team. So, all in all, the stock Medigun is an absolute beast of a weapon. And last but not least, for the stock medic kit, we have got the crit machine itself, the Bonesaw. While it's not the most useful thing, by God, is it fun to land crit after crit with this monstrosity. While as a medic you don't get many chances to jump into the fray, to whip around with your melee weapon, most people know how to use melee weapons, and oh my God, it's so fun. You get so many crits with this weapon. It's hilarious. It's so fun to kill a heavy, and then a demo man, and then a pyro, and then a medic, and then just keep on going. Crit after crit after crit after crit. It's amazing. I love this weapon. For the next 3 weapons, I chose a loadout that I called the Uber Medic, consisting of the Overdose, the Vaccinator, and the Ubersaw. The first weapon is the Overdose. It is Medic's primary weapon. The utility department, it is on par with the normal Syringe Gun. It does less damage, but it also has a very cool side effect. For accessibility, you know, anyone can build Uber and then whip out the primary and then just zoom around. And for the zooming around, it's so fun. It's really fun to have maximum Uber, especially with the Ubersaw and the Vaccinator. You build Uber so fast. Getting the max Uber, you zoom, you are speed. You're so fast, and it's just fun. It's fun to use. Next up in the Uber Medic build, we've got the Vaccinator. I kind of gave the Vaccinator a tough run with a 4 out of 5 in the utility. It is a Medigun. All the Mediguns are very useful. I think I gave most of them 4 to 5 range. They're good, especially with the Vaccinator's ability to specifically choose a damage type in the heat of a battle to protect against, which is why it's not very easy to use. I mean, of course, you can just stick with bullet resistance, but you're not going to be getting the most out of this weapon. To get the most out of this weapon, you need to be good. You need to be quick with switching, and for fun, it's not very fun. It can get a bit boring to just choose a damage type and then just pop it. Next up is the Ubersaw, a veritable fan favorite, and it is not hard to see why. It is extremely useful, and that 20% slower firing speed is doing nothing to counter that 25% extra Uber charge restored on hit. It also encourages medics to go out and stab people, which is definitely something to look out for, especially considering that astronomically high crit rate. As I've said before, most people know how to use a melee weapon, but it doesn't go the extra mile to make that super easy to use, especially considering that slower firing speed, thus granting it a 3 out of 5 on the accessibility scale. On the other hand, the fun, I gave a 4 out of 5, which is 1 down from the stock Bonesaw, just because of that slower firing speed. So it's just that tiniest bit away from the perfection that is the Bonesaw. Next up are the 3 weapons that I put into a loadout and called the Full Heals Medic, which includes the Crusader's Crossbow, the Quick Fix, and the Amputator. Now, starting off with the Crusader's Crossbow, by God, is this an extremely useful weapon. Not only does it do 75 damage per shot at the maximum range, it can also do 150 healing at maximum range with a single bolt. This is extremely effective as both huge damage and long range healing, as long as you can hit your shots, that is. Which brings us to this weapon's greatest failure, the accessibility. It is really hard to land your shots at long ranges because people move around a lot, and it's slow, and it arcs, and you wouldn't want to use this if you're a new player. But when you do get good at it, it is fun. It is fun to snipe people. I didn't rename my crossbow to Sniper Gaming for nothing. It does damage. Incredibly useful. Honestly, my favorite medic primary. Immediately following my favorite medic primary is my favorite Medigun, the Quick Fix. Now, you may look at the stats that I've given the Quick Fix and say that I am very biased, and yes, I am. It is good. It's really good. Utility-wise, 4 out of 5. The only thing that's wrong with it is that the Uber charge doesn't make you invincible. But the upsides is that it heals so fast, like 40% faster. That's really good. Really good. Not to mention its accessibility. 5. The easiest Medigun by far. The extra Ubercharge rate, along with the faster healing rate, it just makes it mind-bogglingly simple to use. Click on someone, their health is up to the max so fast, and it's fun. I wouldn't still be using this if it wasn't fun. The fact that you can heal people so quick allows you time to do damage. That's right, you can do damage. And also heal other people. I guess the main point of it is to heal a bunch of people really fast, but it's kind of funny to just heal one heavy and watch as like no one can kill him because you Ubered him with the quick fix. In conclusion, it's quick at fixing people. It lives up to its name very well. Continuing on with our theme of full heals, we've got the Amputator, which when you're holding it gives you +3 health regenerated on yourself per second. Now, I probably don't need to explain to you why that is really good. You might be wondering what the downside is. Well, it does 20% less damage. The funny thing is, it still does 150 damage on a crit, which is enough to kill the light classes. So that 1 damage downside isn't really much of a downside at all. In terms of utility, that regeneration is good, and that less damage doesn't really affect it that much. In terms of accessibility, it is a melee weapon, and it is not hard by any means. Any player can just whip out their melee weapon and get that extra regen easy peasy. In terms of fun, there's nothing really fun about getting extra regen, but it is a medic melee weapon, so it's basically a given. All in all, if you're going for more of a passive medic approach, this is definitely the melee weapon for you. Next up is a goofy little setup that I like to call everything else. This includes the Blutsauger, the Kritzkrieg, and the Solemn Vow. Starting off with the Blutsauger, it is not the most useful syringe gun. I would say it is just about as useful as the stock with the hit to medic's health regen, but with the upside of if you can land your shots, you get a pretty hefty boost to your health. That is, again, only if you can hit your shots, which was a downside of it's a downside of every single weapon in the game, but it's extremely prevalent with the Blutsauger because it relies heavily on actually being able to hit your opponents to actually make back that health regen that you lost, making it require quite a bit of skill to actually get any benefit from it. And in the case of fun, I was torn between 3 and 4, but I couldn't quite think of a single reason why it should be 1 point more fun than the original syringe gun, so I just left it at 3. Next up is the Kritzkrieg, whose stats go a little bit like this. In terms of usefulness, yeah, random crits are great, but why not just have all crits for 8 whole seconds? Yeah, that seems awesome and great and fair. And it is fair, because the downside is that there's no resistances to damage, no invulnerability, no increased heal rate while the Uber is in action. Just crits. Your heal target is a glass cannon at that point, which makes it a little bit more difficult to use. By a little bit, I mean a lot. You're not invulnerable to anything, really, except for not getting kills, which is why in terms of accessibility, I only gave it a 2. Because, I mean, you gotta know how to not die while being Ubered, and if you're Ubering, anyone with the Kritzkrieg, you are the enemy team's #1 target at that time. But, in terms of fun, I don't think I need to tell you why it is super duper fun to crit someone and just watch them shred everything in front of them. All in all, the Kritzkrieg is pretty great, but you gotta be pretty dang good at the game to use it. So, It's definitely not on the top of my list. And now for the last weapon. What? No. No. Get out. We aren't discussing you. Man. The last weapon. Yes. The Solemn Vow. Described by many to be a direct upgrade from stock, the Solemn Vow is, in my opinion, the best medic melee weapon. The Solemn Vow allows you to see the health of enemies, much like the Spy is able to do. The only downside is a 10% slower firing speed, which is unnoticeable. This makes it extremely useful because the 10% slower firing speed rarely comes into play at all, if not ever. And the ability to see enemies' health is an invaluable tool to any player. As for accessibility, it's stock, but you can see enemies' health. It's so easy to use. It's a melee weapon. That's it. With a huge upside. As for fun, I love the design of this weapon. This is a very nice looking weapon. The Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, the irony there, that is funny. And it's a medic melee weapon. Of course it's fun. And with that, we have gone over every single weapon for the medic. No, I can't cover the Bonesaw. The Bonesaw, you don't need another person to explain to you why the Bonesaw is so bad. I mean, look at it. What is its upside? It's extremely confusing, but every time you hit someone, you collect one of their organs, which represents 15% of your Uber charge level that you can retain when you die. This stacks up to 4 times to 60%, but you lose your organs when you die. So unless you hit someone 4 times with this melee weapon, you're not going to be getting the most out of this weapon. I mean, because it forces you to get up close and personal, it would be kind of stupid to give it a really bad downside that would make that nearly impossible. Oh wait, 10 less maximum health, bringing the medic down to 140. The mere existence of the Ubersaw renders this weapon completely useless. I want to know what the Team Fortress 2 devs were on when they cooked up this awful piece of garbage. For something named the Bonesaw, it is the least vital weapon, not only for the medic, but in the entire game. Of course, the most glaring issue with this weapon is how every single one of its stats seem to contradict each other. For one thing, it wants you to focus more on melee, while also reducing your health by a not insignificant amount. On top of that, by focusing more on melee, you're not healing people as much. You know what happens when you heal people? You build Uber. So if you're healing someone and not focusing on stabbing people, then what's the point of using the Bonesaw? And if you're only stabbing people and you're not building Uber, then what's the point of the Bonesaw? Aside from being an entirely pointless weapon, in the utility department, it's not super useful. As I've already explained, unless you hit people 4 times before dying, you retain 60% of your Uber in the accessibility range. Man. It not only doesn't do anything to make this weapon fun, or enjoyable to use, or easier to use, it does the opposite and makes it much harder to use by reducing your health. But, well, we've reached the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what class you want me to review next, and please, for the love of God, don't use the Bonesaw.